Good afternoon and happy International Women's Day. Most important day of the year. Just kidding, but you know, truly, really a wonderful, important day across the globe. I'd now like to call to order this meeting of the Human Resources Governance and Stakeholder Relations Committee of Waterfront Toronto. I've been advised that a quorum is present and it's appropriate to proceed. So firstly, I'd like to welcome all of those who are joining our meeting today. And I'd also like to remind you that the open session of today's meeting is being recorded and will be posted for the public to view. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to our committee's newest member, Councillor Malik. Councillor Malik has been appointed to the board by the City of Toronto, and we thank her very much for her contributions to both the city and to Waterfront Toronto. And before we begin, I also want to thank Jack and Jeannie for joining. Do we have any other directors on the line?
I think that's it.
I think Drew and Leslie are joining partway through the meeting as well. So before we get to the business of the meeting, we will commence with the land acknowledgement. Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that the land upon which we're undertaking our revitalization efforts is part of the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. In addition, Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that Toronto has historically been a gathering place for many Indigenous people, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat people, and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples today. So the first item of business is the approval of the meeting agenda. And I would note that for this meeting, we're now proposing that item 10, being the director's only session, be held at the conclusion of the meeting. And we've followed this practice at recent meetings and board meetings, and we find it works well. So may I please have a motion to approve the agenda for the meeting as amended? Is there a mover? Thank you, Raul. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Wendy. Any just
Paul's on as well.
Yeah,
Paul?
sorry, I've been on for some reason. I was muted. I'm in.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Paul, seconded by Paul.
Yes.
All in favor? Okay, so they're now asking if there's any conflict of interest to be declared. Okay, none declared. We can now move on to the business of the meeting. Thank you. So the first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the open session of the November 10th, 2022 meeting. May I please have a motion to approve the November 10th, 2022 meeting open session minutes? Thank you, Raul. Is there a seconder?
I second it.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, all in favor, contrary? Okay, so the minutes are approved, and now we are we're now moving to have an update on ESG. So I'd now like to ask Lisa Taylor to briefly speak on the ESG update that's included in our materials.
And Wendy, I'll just point out that Leslie Wu has joined us as well now. So.
Yes. Hi, Leslie. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Sorry to be late.
And happy International Women's Day.
Thanks,
All
Wendy.
right.
And good afternoon, everyone. So in terms of the ESG update for this quarter, as outlined on the two-page dashboard here in front of us, we do continue to progress the key initiatives that are outlined here, including implementing key areas of our climate action plan, which includes things like exploring a net zero target for Waterfront Toronto. And that involves establishing what our baseline greenhouse gas emissions are as a target for reduction, as well as researching pathways to get to net zero, particularly for our construction projects. And while Waterfront Toronto as a corporation has not set an overall net zero target, we do consider net zero on a project basis, such as for the Quayside development and Villiers Island as examples. This quarter, we also amended our procurement policy to include new sections on social and sustainable procurement to ensure that these areas are considered as part of our ongoing procurement processes. And finally, I just want to highlight that at the March 27th board meeting in a couple of weeks, we will have our Director of Sustainability and Innovation come and present to give an update to our directors on our climate action plan and some of the key initiatives underway within that. that's the update. Happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa? Raul?
Lisa, just a comment once again. Well done on this. I think this is really important work and speaks to collective impact. Sometimes we can get lost in the business of the organization, and I think it's great to pull this lens back. And just to remind everybody, and I know you're aware of a lot of the conversations around ESG in general as it relates to corporate governance, but it is a leading practice, so it's important to do it. I think it's great for the organization to align with the UN SDGs. It's some great impact on a global level, but it's a smart play also for the organization to identify those SDGs that actually relate to the business and to monitor those. So I commend you on doing it. And, you know, my vote is to bring this to a strategic retreat each year as a standing item to get an update on. It tends to reaffirm the work we're doing and lead to some very interesting opportunities as well. So congratulations.
Thank you. Much appreciated, Rahul.
Thank you, Raul. Any other questions for Lisa? Okay,
Wendy, if
thank
I can
you.
just add
Yes.
to Raul's comment, it's also an important part of our historical brand. And I think, you know, for all the reasons that Raul's already identified, not only for board governance, but in terms of the branding of the organization, it's been important as well. Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, I think, Wendy.
Thank you. So we are now moving on to item number 5, the Human Resources Report. And Rose DeRoche, VP of Human Resources, is now going to give us an update report. And also, George, just a reminder, when Rose finishes her report, if you can speak about the office move as well to keep everybody in the loop.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Welcome. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome Councillor Malik to our great committee. So we've got a lot on the agenda today, so I'm just going to do a few highlights for information and activities we move forward in the last quarter. The report is there. Our recruitment numbers for filled and vacant positions are reflected in the report. Just a couple of comments on the recruitment efforts. Despite the continued labor shortages across all sectors, we've successfully hired and onboarded 4 new staff during the last quarter. We continue to experience longer than usual recruitment times, not only due to the labor shortage, but also because of the corporation's salary freeze over the last 4 years. This resulted in our compensation not up to date with current market for certain levels. As a result, we prioritized our salary benchmarking exercise to ensure our competitiveness when recruiting in the market. We hired H. Wilkinson Consulting Group to assess our compensation strategy and conduct a benchmarking exercise comparing salary ranges and salaries at WT to benchmark position from both private and public sectors within the GTA and across industries. There'll be further information and recommendations in the closed session as Heather will be joining us. Along with returning to the workplace, we continue to be in office 5 days over a 2-week period. We continue to use our Robin check-in. And as of October 1st, we've removed all required health checks for staff and guests and the vaccine requirement for any new staff. As always, if things come up, we'll continue to check in with Toronto Health, Public Health. We thank you, Wendy, for bringing up the office move. This is where I just wanted to say that the office cleanup project continues in the office. We provide information and updates to staff at town halls. And we also give them opportunities to provide feedback on common spaces and furnishings. George, did you want to add anything here about the?
Yeah, I think I'll just add, Wendy, I'll just put my camera on. We have been working on the design of the actual space. So what you might recall is that we have gone from 22,000 square feet to 15,000 square feet, so a large reduction. We've also incorporated into this collaborative space. So we've wanted to make sure that we have collaborative space that actually gets used. The other part of this is we've also tried to design some open space, which is kind of kitchen area space, et cetera, that can be expanded out from the boardroom. So if we have large gatherings of public, we have the spaces. We currently have the ability to break out one more room here in our boardroom. So we've got that. We have engaged on our designers to look at what the opportunities are to effectively use that smaller space. And we've engaged staff and will be engaging staff over the coming weeks and months to conclude on the design, finalizing design, but also in selecting, you know, the seats, computers that they'd want, and more input into some of the common space like the kitchen areas, etc. We are currently on target to be completed by the end of the calendar year, so we should be moving in by January 1st. And we continue to keep staff apprised, and so far, don't want to curse ourselves, but so far so good.
Okay, thank
George.
you very much. Rose, is there anything else?
Yep,
Yeah.
just a brief update on DE&I.
Okay.
Happy to say that our organizational values and affirmation statement work has been completed for now. After many revisions and versions and a lot of hard work from our staff, we've landed on our final versions. You all would have received a final copy of the final versions of our 4 values and our first ever affirmation statement in the package. These versions will be incorporated in our onboarding material for new staff and shared on our corporate website. Also in Q3, we conducted a trainee needs assessment. This will support our goal of ensuring that we have an inclusive workplace with a welcoming culture free from harassment. We're also going to determine what kind of continued D&I learning and training we want to provide to our employees. And we're further assessing and analyzing what our next steps are going to be. Just one last point, you all should have received an email from me this morning on our public sector salary disclosure. Most of you know about what it is. Our friends from MOI, I believe, are on the line as well. The Public Sector Salary Disclosure Act 1996 mandates any public organization that receives funding from the province of $1 million or more to disclose all salaries over $100,000. Waterfront Toronto did receive over $1 million in funding in 2022, thus requiring us to disclose. And for the last 21 years, we've disclosed. The public sector salary disclosure was submitted to MOI on March 7th by the required deadline, along with a short briefing note and some Q&As, and those were all shared with you by email today as a confidential email. My understanding is that typically the public disclosure gets posted no later than March 31st, although there has been experiences where they've disclosed it earlier, and I'm not sure if any of our friends from MOI on the line actually have a date when it will be disclosed publicly. Yep. Okay. Just highlights, like I said, I'm happy to take any questions. Christina's on the line as well. If there's any questions around DE&I or anything that I'm happy to address.
So just on the DE&I, this is was led with some consulting help and really has been a bottom up, having a staff involved. In fact, over half of our staff were actively involved in the process, and I think we reported that before.
Very good. Any questions, Raul?
I've got just a general question. I mean, everything seems to be on track. Congrats on doing the DE&I process. The language in there, I know how tough it is to wordsmith that accurately, but if you've got folks that actually believe that and view it, that's great. So you're off to a great start. My question is a little bit broader, and maybe you're going to touch on it in terms of the office moves, but more specifically around the in-office days. And George, there's been a lot of change over the last couple of years. What's the impact on culture been from your perspective? Is this something that you're feeling comfortable directionally, or is it raising any flags with you?
No, I think it's been, as you know, Raul, I've reported, we were one of the first back a couple days a week. So the transition wasn't as large for us to go from 2 days, quite frankly, to 2.5 days a week. I think what we found, in fact, when we in December had all staff in, there was an energy that everybody recognized that was important to have people in. So what we've been doing is, you know, we get feedback from staff as to how best to use our days in together, and we've tried to be purposeful on those days. But also, we are requiring all staff to be in 1 day every, let's say, 6 weeks, where the entire team is in. We coordinate that with an all staff meeting so that everybody gets briefed up. But one of the things that we recognize, there are staff that have joined us over the last year or 2 years that have never met other people. And it really was an important part of the discussion is that staff didn't feel completely part of the organization until they actually got to meet everybody and feel that they knew. And we're a small organization, so it's not as hard. But so far, people have been very supportive of the approach we've taken. So we haven't had any real pushback. I think we've been reasonable. And, you know, we've always said we're going to be reasonable throughout this, and there's no magic formula. We're going to work this out together, and people have been very supportive. So I'm very proud of the way the staff have engaged ourselves collectively.
George, can I add something?
Yeah, Rose.
Just one quick thing, what George alluded to, what we're calling our corporate day once every 6 weeks, I believe is going to be really great as well. It'll even go better for morale. People, like George said, are going to meet each other. We're going to also bring in some lunch and learns, educate people on different things. Like Cameron and I were talking, we're going to do one around Earth Day at the end of April. We're going to bring people in on projects. We're going to have some of our project team members present on projects they're working on, just to get everybody re-energized again.
The other thing I would add to the discussion is, even though we've mandated 2.5 days, business operations and business needs dictate. So some people are in 4 days, some people are in, 3 days. It really is about being reasonable and flexible. And we use the 2.5 days as a kind of minimum, but we're also flexible if there are other needs.
Thank you, George and Rose. Are there any other questions? Okay, so can we now have a motion to go into closed session to discuss items 7, 8, 9, and 10 of today's agenda? Can I have a mover? Thank you, Raul. And seconder?
I second.
Thank you, Paul. So motion carried. I also want to remind everyone that any resolution considered in the closed session needs to be passed when the meeting returns to open session. Okay, so we've now returned to the open session and have resumed a recording of the session. May I please have a motion to approve the November 10th, 2022 committee meeting closed session meetings? Is there a mover?
So moved.
Thank you, Paul, or Raul. Paul seconding.
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, so that's approved approval of the open session meetings as well. Or I should say the closed session meeting minutes. So now, having concluded the business of the meeting, I ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a mover? Thank you, Raul. Seconder?
Got me, I guess, again.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so our meeting is adjourned.